fact, according to the Jewish tradition upon which that was based, the story goes that this relative of his actually leaves the house, and Abraham smashes all the idols, and he comes back in, and Abraham says, "Oh, the idol told me to do it." And one of the idols told me to do it. And the guy says, "Can an idol speak?" And he's like, "Yeah, I think you just answered your own question. No, of course they can't speak, and of course they're false. They're not real. They're not actual gods." And that's what I want to start with this morning, to say that we're all atheists. Is that a shocking statement? We're all atheists. Do you know why? Because the word theist means belief in God. It refers to belief in God. And when you add the prefix "a" in Greek, it negates it. It means without. And so in this case, to be an atheist is disbelief in God. And what I should have put actually is belief in gods or disbelief in gods, because the point I'm making here is none of us here today, none of us alive today, maybe there's a fringe movement out there, who knows, but none of us believe in the god of the Greeks like Zeus. None of us believe in the gods of the Egyptians like Ra. None of us believe in the Norse gods like Thor. Let's show some of these gods, right? None of us believe in the Hindu gods like Vishnu, and so on. We can literally pick any ancient culture, and they had a whole bunch of gods that they worshipped and believed in. So do any of you believe that these gods are real? No, and I would venture to say most people don't believe these gods were real. However, the people who lived back then, they were consumed with living their lives in such a way where they cared about what these gods thought. They tried to appease these gods. However, we are atheists when it comes to these gods. And even if none of us have ever even thought about that, like in the sense that we've never intentionally disbelieved, I've never actually sat there and thought, I don't believe in Zeus. That doesn't matter. Because functionally speaking, like the way I live my life, I live as if Zeus doesn't exist, right? Isn't real. So you could say that about all of these gods. Thousands and thousands of gods that people believed in the past are completely irrelevant to us today, right? None of us are too concerned or stay up late at night wondering what Zeus thinks about our lives. However, people today take things one step further because, in fact, one of the more famous new atheists, as they're called, Richard Dawkins, he said, "We are all atheists about most of the gods that humanity has ever believed in. But some of us just go one God further." So he makes a correct point, a truth statement here, that we are all atheists when it comes to all these other gods that people have believed in, but some of them, like himself, go one God further and believe in no gods at all. And so modern day atheists believe that no gods exist. People like Dawkins, right? You've heard of him, or maybe Sam Harris, other people like that. They intentionally and philosophically disbelieve in God. They don't believe God exists. However, again, most people today don't even think about it that deeply, right? Most people today don't even care whether they're labeled a theist or an atheist. They don't intentionally disbelieve, but functionally, they live as if God does not exist. And we sort of touched on this last week, that a lot of young people today especially consider God and Christianity in particular to be irrelevant to their lives. And here's the thing, we all do this. And I can show you that we all go through what many young people today and many people today go through when they consider God irrelevant to their life. We would tend to think we should get upset with that, but let me show you that we all do that. Because for the purposes of this thought experiment, I can say, let's just say that there is, in the world today, people believe in only one God. That's not true. There are other gods people believe in today. But let's just narrow it down to the God of Abraham, right? The Abrahamic God, the God of Christians and Jews and Muslims. These represent, of course, the three great religions of the world: Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, right? So it's not an insignificant part of the world believes in one God. However, even though there are lots of agreements among these three groups about God, there's also what? Vast disagreements. The way Christians understand what God is like is not the same way most Jews believe what God is like, or the way most Muslims believe what God is like. And we're not even talking about God's nature, but what God expects of people and what God has said. We have disagreements about that, right? And yet, this is supposed to be the same God. So how does that make sense? If these three huge groups have different understandings of God, and yet it's supposed to be the same God, how can that be? That doesn't make any sense. Now, what do we do as Christians in particular, and they do it too, to us? We just consider their depiction and understanding of God to be false, to be not right. And so what do? We ignore their understanding of God. None of us here, I'm thinking, stay late up at night worrying about the fact that we don't believe in God the way the Muslims understand him, right? Or Jewish people understand him. So we just ignore the fact that even though they claim to believe in the same God and understand him in a different way, that we just ignore that. We just consider it irrelevant to us. So you see how people today, like young people today, can live as if God does not exist, because we do it to the Jewish and Muslim versions of God. But even within Christianity, we have this problem, because Catholics understand God one way, and Protestants understand God a different way, and then within Protestant circles, there's hundreds of different ways of understanding God. And none of us, we might think about it sometimes, and we might even study it out sometimes, but we don't really worry about it. We just consider all of those other ways of understanding God irrelevant to our lives. So we functionally disbelieve in all kinds of versions of God, right? And so I say all of this to bring up that maybe we should have a little humility when it comes to this topic. Because, I think about what God is and how we can understand what God is, and I just am usually in a place of, I don't know what to make of that, right? And I think the way we can get to that place of humility when it comes to this topic is by realizing how very limited we are, right? Do any of you consider that you have all the knowledge of the universe? You guys got everything going for yourself? All right, well, let's just show how small we are. Let me check in on the live stream people. Do any of you have all the knowledge of the universe? Let me know in the chat. And just so you know, just to make sure we all know that we're not as smart as we think and as big as we think, let's just see how small we are. Let's take a look at this video. I love this kind of video where it zooms out on us. Isn't that cool? Yeah, if you watch the rest of the video, it goes into the eye, and so it shows you how similar it is to the way the universe looks. Who here was excited about that Webb telescope that was just launched? That was pretty cool. Did you hear about that? This telescope has been launched, and it's going to be able to detect infrared light, and it's going to be able to detect stars that haven't existed in thousands or millions of years. And the vastness of the universe should hopefully get us to realize that we are so small and limited in our understanding of what is out there. And we think that God is beyond even that, right? God is that which cannot be conceptualized in a simple or very understandable way. In fact, part of this curriculum, the Animate faith curriculum that we're going to be using, And if you do join our Zoom meetings, I want you to know that you're going to get more of this video. We're just going to watch a little part of it right now. But you'll be able to watch more of the video during our Zoom sessions. But it's when we get to this place, when we recognize how small and limited we are, that we then can realize that God is so much more and so much bigger than all of us. And we can't even, again, begin to conceptualize what God is. And so we have to use something that he'll talk about in the video. I'll let him introduce it.
Now, I think that word imagine is central to speaking about God, because whenever we speak of God, we compare God to things we know, and those things become images for God. So we might use physical or functional images for God, imaging God as a rock or a shield or a fortress, or we might use personal and relational images for God, like a mother, father, friend, or king. Or we might use mysterious images of power and wonder for God, like water or fire or wind or light. We have no way to speak or even think about God apart from images like these.
For us, God is something that is beyond us, that we can't even conceptualize it. And in fact, so I posed the question as the title of this message: do you believe in God? And as Brian McLaren said in this video, what do we mean by God, right? Are we talking about the God of other religions? Are we talking about God as it's been conceptualized in the past? Or are we talking about something different? And we're going to get to that in just a second. What we mean here at Glad Tidings when we talk about God, it's important to define what that is. But I say, yes, I believe in God, but what does that mean? And we have to define what that means. So I'll give you a couple things that it's not. I don't believe in God the same way that I believe in you and I right here in this room. You know why? Because I have my sensory observation, my scientific tools that I can use to prove that you're here. I can point at you. I won't touch the rest of you. I'll touch Sarah or smell. The point being is I can use my senses to observe the world around me and people. And that's how I know I'm here and you're here. And so therefore I believe in you, right? Do I believe in God the same way that I believe 1 + 1 = 2? Why do I know that 1 + 1 = 2? Well, 1 + 1 = 2 is just a concept. It's just a way to put into thought form the reality that if I have two objects and put them together, that equals what we conceptualize as 2. One object plus another object, and then you suddenly have 2 objects. So it's a conceptual thing that we then confirm in the real world, right? But I can't do any of those with God, right? I can't feel God. Some people say they hear God. It'd be nice if we could hear God, but most people don't hear God, right? And so we can't observe God in the same way that we observe one another, or we can't even really prove God the same way we can prove that 1 + 1 = 2. So we have to think about God in a more abstract way. And we're going to get into that hopefully maybe next week, and we'll talk about that in our discussion time. What do we mean that we believe in God? But as McLaren said in the video, what we do, because we can't conceptualize him and he's so abstract, we use metaphors or images. We use our imagination. And I know that word has the connotation of not real, but that's not what I mean. I think we just are able to point to stuff, concepts and images and so on, and that refers to God's real activity in our lives, but we're using other things to refer to that activity because we don't know what else to do. So when we say God is the Spirit moving within me, well, the word spirit in the Bible means wind. It was just a way to talk, like we see wind moving stuff around, right? Think of a tornado or a storm. That wind is moving stuff around. Well, that's the same way that God animates us, right? And so we refer to God's Spirit within us. again, these are metaphors. I don't know how literal we can be with any of this, but we can talk about God using these metaphors and images, and we are referring to real things. Because I don't know about you, but I had a real change in my life because of God, right? And I've gone through the past, let's say, how long has it been since I've been a true committed believer? 18, almost 20 years. And I grew up in the church as well, so I've had previous experiences as well. But I can't explain how God has done all these things in my life, but I can trust that he has, in just the evidence of my journey. And so we're going to sing Indescribable. We're going to sing the song, and then I'll have a little bit more of my message afterwards. But we're going to sing Indescribable, because God is indescribable and uncontainable. And in this series, I want us to build our faith. And for some of us, it's going to be a little bit of deconstructing our faith, as we sort of did today, and then trying to build it back up. And then for others, hopefully, both on the live stream, and let's invite our family and friends to come to this series, we're going to be helping them build up their faith from the ground up. Maybe they just have no assumptions about God or about Christianity, and we're going to be able to give them that foundation. And it's going to be something, as I was calling it last week, something we're going to do consciously. Many of us were raised in the church, and we were just told what to believe. Well, we don't want to do that here at Glad Tidings. We want to help people to understand why we believe what we believe, and to consciously embrace those things. And again, here it is as Glad Tidings Church of God, as Christians, we particularly look to Jesus to inform. And I use the word inform, not in a sort of like, well, he's one of many options. No, he is the place to find the definition and our understanding of God. And it's all summed up in this wonderful verse, one of my favorite Bible verses, John 17, verse 3. Jesus is in prayer to God, and he says, "This is eternal life, that they may know you, the only true God." And he says, "And Jesus the Messiah, whom you have sent." And so eternal life, the life of that wonderful age to come, is characterized in knowing, that is, being in relationship with, not just intellectually knowing, but living in relationship with the only true God through Jesus, the Messiah, the one he has sent. This is what sets us apart as Christians, and this is the Christian understanding of God, as opposed to any other understanding of God, that we look to Jesus to inform our understanding of God. And I don't know about you, but as I was writing this message and as I'm saying it right now, there's something deep inside of me, and I think if you look inside yourself, there's a longing for something deeper, right? I think it's in all of us. We want to have that identity of that there is something more to life than just what we go through every day. And that's even within the context of having a contented life. We have a tiring life, a challenging life, but we're very contented, right? We have each other, me and Sarah, and we have our wonderful boys, and we have all of you as a church family. That's a pretty contented life. But that doesn't mean we don't think about deeper things and long for something more than just this life and just what we go through all the time. And so we reach out, and we don't know what that means, and we don't quite understand how we're supposed to understand God. But we recognize that there is something deeper and bigger than us. So to flip it, what I was saying earlier, I want us to go from being functional atheists to being functional theists, right? To be people who live in such a way where we assume God exists and we assume that we have a place in this life with him. So again, this is conscious Christianity, the way I've been thinking of it and saying. Because we live in a post-Christian world. We live in a time in which, especially young people, don't have the same assumptions that previous generations had when it comes to God and faith. And so they weren't raised necessarily believing in God or really understanding what that meant for their lives. In the past, we could have assumed that that's how people would have been, but we can't assume that any longer. We have to help people to basically come to the point where they can come to all this stuff that we're talking about for the first time, really, and build up their faith from the ground up. And you know what? This requires open dialogue. There's no way that a person can come to the Christian faith coming with no presuppositions and then embracing what we're talking about here, both today and in the weeks to come, without dialogue, without discussion, without being able to ask questions without any fear. Often in church settings, especially in the past, you would be afraid to ask questions like, oh, I don't know if I believe in God, right? I don't know if I really understand what that means. Well, the pastor's saying it, okay? I'm saying that these are the kinds of questions we can and should be asking. This is why we have our Zoom discussions for this series. So Tuesdays at 7 p.m., we want to make sure that you can be a part of a discussion time Tuesdays at 7, or if you can't make it then, just let me know and we'll set up other times to meet. Or if you prefer in person, we can figure that out too. So either way, we want to make sure that everyone gets involved. Everyone in our church and everyone who is connected to our church can get an opportunity to be a part of these discussions. Even if you just want to listen in, right? We're not even going to force you to talk if you don't want to. If you just want to join the meeting and listen in, that's perfectly fine. And so join our mailing list on our website, gladtidingschurchofgod.com, and sign up there, and then you will be provided the Zoom meeting information. Join us on this journey over the next few weeks. I think it's going to be really, really interesting. So next...